Delighted, John, you have joined us here today from America. Um, it's been a very strange year for us either side of the Atlantic. I can honestly say, and one of the things that we were very bullish about for the BT Young Scientist was that it would go ahead this year. We're a technology company, and there is technology as part of the title of the exhibition. So I'm delighted now that we can do that with the ongoing COVID restrictions and stuff. But one of the things I just wanted to discuss with you and have a chat about today is we will be using the Mansion Houses as our hub as such for the exhibition. And that's where the first ever Young Scientist took place. It's the only time it's actually taken place in
Mhm.
1965. And you won. And I was just wondering what your recollections were from that first ever Young Scientist.
It is interesting. We've done the full circle, I guess. I mean, after all of these years, I actually don't remember a tremendous amount about the Mansion House. I was just a kid up in the country at that time of my life. I do remember it as sort of a big event. At least to my mind, at that time, there were just lots of people. To me, it was the first time I was amongst students of my age that were truly interested in science, and I got a great kick out of wandering around and talking to other students and sort of a social interaction, because I lived in the country down in Stratham, basically from a scientific perspective in total isolation, so I had no real way to appraise how good or how bad I was in science, and it was the first time that I actually managed to meet other boys and girls that are my same age, and I had a genuine interest in science, and I realized that I wasn't the only one, so to speak. That's probably the most vivid, lasting impression I have of it.
Yeah, because I know you've got a sort of a long-term relationship with science, as you would say. But I know that one of our favorite photographs that I think you're quite tired of seeing now is that lovely photograph of yourself with Sean Namaste, the then Taoiseach
Yeah.
of Ireland back in the 60s. It's one thing that we're always delighted with is the level of support that we get from government, but also that the president will come along, and you've met him, I know, on several occasions now before the opening ceremony, and our Taoiseach and other ministers and everything else. It's just going to be a different year for us this year. Like we've had a wonderful opening ceremony which the president has taken part in, and the Taoiseach has sent his warmest wishes to all the students that are involved as well. And I think that the thing that hasn't changed probably in the 57 years since you were first involved is that ingenuity and of the students, and their love of science and just exploration. And from your judging experience over the last 8 years with us, what would be the standout moments for you around that?
First thing that absolutely stands out to me is just the level of knowledge and sophistication of essentially all the students, not just the winners, but the level of knowledge of science and the particular domains that the students are working in is just incredibly high these days. And I mean, to the point that many of these students, in particular, almost all the winners, are at what I call university grade in terms of their knowledge of science. One or two of them just stand out over the years. I don't want to mention names, but one or two of them, and I'm only primarily talking about the biologics, we're almost at a postdoc or graduate student level of sophistication and knowledge. Now, obviously, the access to the internet, the access to data and information, again, over the 50 plus years has evolved to the point that you can get to that level of sophistication. And back in my day, the best you could do would be to visit a library, and I actually never even visited a library back then. It was a manage a couple of old books I could manage to round up. So that's probably the most overwhelming difference is the level of sophistication of the students in their particular fields.
Yeah, and it's going to be a particularly difficult year for them this year. We've had, which you probably know about, John, that we had schools closed down in the spring this year, and then there was quite a long hiatus before the students went back. So normally where students would be looking at their projects for a longer term, they haven't had that same time to explore the subject matter and get into labs and everything else. So I think we will see a little bit of a difference this year in that. But I know you won't see any of the projects before you start judging with us in January, but it'll be interesting to see what the judges think overall of the quality this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think the slant, and certainly in terms of, what I say, experimental demonstration maybe is going to be a little bit curtailed, and the fact that a true show and tell is probably not going to be quite as practical as we've had in the past. That said, I mean, I think most of the time, certainly for myself and the other judges, I mean, we look at the total package that the student has managed to put together. I mean, and in other words, their knowledge, their capability, where to see the project going forward in the future, just their overall excellence. And I've said it many times. I mean, in many cases, the students partition into different levels very quickly in the conversation. And the true winners, the true ones that stand out very quickly. You get down to a limited number of students, and then they're all roughly the same, and it becomes quite difficult. But in terms of their capability, I always say that science is just like any other branch of endeavor. It's kind of like music, or it's like painting. All of us can play the piano if we try hard enough, or paint the picture, but very few of us become true artists or true musicians. There's just a certain kind of talent that you have, and that becomes very apparent to the judges very quickly, certainly if you've been doing it long enough, and I'm sure it's the same in many other walks of life. So I think the students themselves, will sort of sense that. I don't, scientists in general tend to be very creative and work around things, and that is sort of one of the tests, if you will, is under the circumstances and the restrictions, if you will, that they've had on them this year, how did they manage? How did they cope? And, most experiments, as we well know, and certainly I'm sure the students know, don't work. Only about 1 in 10. So there are a lot of disappointments. And one of the things in science that you very quickly learn is you have to get used to disappointments. And if everything's working right every time, you're clearly overlooking something. And certainly for science, you have to improvise. You have to work around, the parameters. As we say in science, you have to play with the deck of cards you have in your hand, and that is certainly going to be the case this year for this competition.
The judging process won't change this year, I'm glad to say. The only difference is that we won't, unfortunately, be able to interact with the students face to face, or you with your fellow judges as well. But it's one thing, if you could just talk about the ethos of the judging process, which hasn't really changed probably since you competed.
I mean, the first thing to really assure the students is that the judging process is incredibly thorough. I mean, apart from myself and my colleagues, the whole network, the system involved in judging is by now actually very sophisticated. Incredible detail is put into it, thanks to the work of yourself and the total staff behind you. The process, obviously, not to go into the details, but it involves, particular judges looking at individual projects. The judges themselves, and this is the hard part for the judges, work completely independent of each other. And they do not communicate in terms of who they think, during the judging process should be 1, 2, or 3, or whatever grading system we use. It's only when we all get together and everybody calls out what they liked about an individual project and what was somewhat lacking in some cases, and actually give a number. And it's really tough for judges, because you actually don't want to be gee, did I really miss something here? Or, I'm actually not smart enough to realize what the student was doing. The thing that amazes me, and I've been doing it now, as you say, for 9 years, is how almost without exception, the judges come to the same conclusion. I honestly can't remember a situation, and I've probably done a couple of hundred by now, where there was a marked difference, where 1 or 2 judges were completely off the map relative to their colleagues. It is amazing how consistent the judges are. Now, unlike myself, many of these judges are teachers and, a tremendous amount of experience judging students, and probably very quickly arrive at a number, if you will, in terms of the grading level. It's a little bit of a struggle for me. I don't normally deal with students, deal with fellow scientists and things like that. But I am always impressed with how consistent and sweat off my own brow is that fortunately for me, my numbers actually seem to correlate with what the other judges do, and that, frankly, is a real relief. So just for the students, I really would want them to appreciate that it is very sophisticated, it's very fair, and very thorough. But in the end, at least the ones I've been involved in, I've always come away very satisfied that the right winners were identified.
Yeah, and that's something that BT have inherited as part of our us being the sponsor and organizer of the event, is that one thing we have never wanted to interfere with, and one thing I know that Dr. Tony Scott, the co-founder, would never let us interfere with in the judging process. And I think it's why the exhibition has stood the test of time, and why people are so interested in it, because of the people that are involved in it. And I must, we owe all the judges across all of the years just such a debt of gratitude. Like, I don't think people appreciate that all of our judges actually give up their time for free. And if you look through the panel of judges and just the very eminent scientists and lecturers, as you said, teachers that we have as part of our panels, it just blows us away every year that people willingly give up their time. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about, John, is we're in the middle of this global pandemic. And your background as a scientist is biotechnology, and it's one thing that's fascinated me. I'm not a scientist and will never claim to be one.
Well, you're certainly getting there now, Mary, after all of these years.
Yeah, osmosis does work. Sometimes I have a little bit more of an understanding after 20 years, I must say. But just this scientific global effort to get a vaccine, and I know there's been a rollout program across the globe as well. What is your main takeout being from that and that global effort from the scientific community?
I've been involved in working with viruses for the past 30, 35 years. I'm obviously a biotech background and see it from frankly, a fairly different perspective than most people would. I think when you look, when we say 20 years, 25 years from now, when people then look back at what was accomplished, I think it will be one of the major milestones of science, if not biotechnology. People don't realize what has been accomplished. I mean, in the space of literally a few months, vaccines have been identified, studied, manufactured, and scaled up to essentially treat the world population. And that is an remarkable accomplishment. It shows the might of the pharmaceutical industry, how sophisticated it is on a worldwide basis, and probably be one of the major accomplishments of the 21st century.
Yeah, and it's something that we've always known because of me being the sort of lay person involved in science and technology, and you in the forefront and working in it, that like how important science and technology and people getting involved in science and technology and the conversation and the education around science and technology is really, really important. And we've seen that from the shortlist that the judges did earlier in the year for us, around October time, that we had a lot of projects around COVID, about not only from the sort of the efficacy of different face masks and different things like that, but around the psychological effects on families and people from lockdowns and shifting lockdowns and everything else. So it's been an amazing year in that regard, and I hope the lessons that we've all learned as a society won't be short-lived.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, I think, if people in the past have pointed out the potential for something like this. I mean, Bill Gates is well known for this in the sense that, the number of people affected, the number of people, unfortunately, that have died, are almost dwarfing the wars that we've had around the world. And the focus in the past has always been on armament and infrastructure to take care of things like that. I think mankind, and certainly the developed countries, were basically blindsided in terms of this structural weakness that existed in terms of taking care of pandemics like this. And unfortunately, as we understand these types of things, and as we understand the biology and the factors involved, there is no reason to believe this will not happen again. So going forward, I think certainly in the sophisticated countries, there will have to be an effort to better look out for things like this, be better prepared to tackle it, be better prepared to identify and use vaccines, scale up and produce, such a way we don't have this, frankly, disaster that has come upon us in the past year.
John, it's been lovely talking to you, and I must say I'll miss our conversations and meeting up with you face to face this year. But I hope by 2022 we'll be welcoming you back in Dublin. And thank you again so much for taking part. It means a lot to not only your fellow judges that you take part, but I know the excitement from the young people that you interact with as a judge the week of the exhibition is, I always get brilliant stories back from them afterwards. So thanks so much, John, for your time.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Mary, and it's been a real pleasure as usual to talk to you, to see again, the tremendous progress made over the past year by yourself, your staff, and the students, and I'm truly looking forward to the actual judging, and certainly looking forward to following the course of the event over the next year. Again, thank you very much. It's a real honor as usual to interact with you.
Thank you, John.